Well, sellers are certainly panicking in many areas of the US as buyers take more control of the housing market. Even in areas like right here in Columbus, Ohio, where the Zillow heat market index has shifted from well over 100 at one point to now well under 100, basically signaling the fact that buyers are gaining more control of the housing market. But that's not the case in all areas of the US. Some areas are still a red hot seller's market, and some areas are much more of a buyer's market than here in Columbus, Ohio. Where is that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today on the Housing Nerd. So if you are looking for a real estate YouTube channel, real estate source of data and insight, you came to the right spot for honest, unbiased, unfiltered takes on the housing market and data. If you're looking for someone, a realtor, to tell you, like a typical realtor would, that now is the best time to buy real estate, that you should marry the house and date the rate, you came to the wrong channel. I'm not going to tell you that. Conversely, if you came to my channel hoping I would tell you that the market is filled with fraud, greed, and corruption, and there's no way you should be buying a house right now because the market is really toxic, then you also came to the wrong channel, because I'm not going to tell you that either. I'm just going to give you the data you need to make the right decisions about real estate, because at the end of the day, I'm not you. I don't know where you live. I don't know your financial situation, and you need to make those decisions yourself. So that's what we're going to do today, is look at the Zillow Heat Index. Let's get started. By the way, my name is Jason Ferrier. I am a realtor. I'm an investor just outside of Columbus, Ohio, and I do these lives a few times a week. And I'm thankful that you're joining me today. So let's get started. We're going to first look at, though, the article that really comes with that map I just showed you. And this article is from Resi Club Analytics. So Resi Club, if you don't already know, is a fantastic real estate data company. I definitely encourage you to check them out. The link's in my description below if you're using YouTube. If you're using Facebook, I don't put links in there. You'll have to use YouTube to check out those links. All right. So according to Resi Club, and this is based on a Zillow Heat Index article, Zillow economists use an economic model known as the Zillow Market Heat Index to gauge the competitiveness of housing markets across the country. This model looks at key indicators, including home price changes, inventory levels, and days on market, to generate a score showing whether a market favors sellers or buyers. A higher score indicates a hotter metro level housing market where sellers have more power. A lower score indicates a colder metro level housing market where buyers have more power. According to Zillow, a score of 70 or above is a strong seller's market. 55 to 69, seller's market. 45 to 55, a neutral market. 28 to 44, a buyer's market. And 27 or below, a strong buyer's market. So in Columbus, we're basically still in a, quote, seller's market, but we have come from a strong, super strong seller's market, as has many areas of the U.S. So I'll show you that more in a minute, because we'll kind of look at some different cities. A higher score indicates a hotter. Okay, so here's the Zillow Market Index for the U.S. You can kind of see here where it's gone over the past few years. So like nationally, we were at 50, a score of 50 back in 2018, which is a neutral market, Zillow's saying. I don't know if that's coincidental or that's just the way the data rolled, but they're saying back in 2018, it was a neutral market. No buyers, sellers were kind of meeting in the middle. Probably what you may consider just a healthy market, right? I know when I was in real estate, I was in real estate. I was a realtor. I was actually doing like some of my first flips, I think, were completing around that period of time in 2018. And yeah, like you could flip a home, an affordable home. And for Columbus, like it was like in the $150,000 price range, around there, $120,000 price range, which seems insane now, right? I mean, we're talking move-in ready, like new kitchen, bathroom, flooring, outside done, new windows, all that stuff. And yeah, flipping $120,000 homes. And we were making money on them. Like on a home, like 120 grand, you make 30 grand on it. So, and it gave somebody an affordable home to buy. Those days are obviously long gone, but back then homes were taking like, you would get a home in contract if it was priced right in like 30 days. That's what I remember. So neutral market meant that you had some people looking at the beginning. You had people, making some offers. They probably asked for some concessions. You didn't know if the home was going to appraise at the asking price. It was kind of a gamble. Yeah, neutral market. Then obviously it went insane, right? Look at this. It went nationally to near 90, which if 70 signals a strong seller's market, I would say the US was in a super strong seller's market. Columbus, we were over 100. I think the highest or the strongest seller's market I've seen when I looked at the data was San Francisco, was like 173. But we'll look at that more in a minute, where the markets are different. And then it kind of traveled as a seller's market, and now it's dipped. It hasn't dipped a ton nationally, but it has started to come down. You can tell that, lower high and lower low has started to take effect, and now we're in a neutral market or close to it. But comment below and tell me what you think. Are we in a neutral market? What about your market? Do you think you're in a neutral market? Or do you think you're in a seller's market or a buyer's market? Which one? Nationally, Zillow rates the U.S. housing market at a 55 for its March 2025 reading published in April. That said, Zillow's reading varies significantly across the country. So we'll look at the map in a second. I just want to kind of look at these highlights. Among the 250 largest metro area housing markets, these 10 are the hottest markets where sellers have the most power. Rochester, New York, 185. Still, Rochester, I was wrong. I thought San Fran was the highest I had seen. But Rochester, New York is 185 today. Columbus is like a 63. Buffalo, New York, 128. Syracuse, New York, 102. So New York has the top 3 spots, not New York City, but has the top 3 spots for sellers markets, according to Zillow. Hartford, Connecticut, 99. Charleston, West Virginia, look out. Mountaineers. Got a new coach. Well, kind of an old new coach. We'll see how they do. Charleston, West Virginia, 97. Albany, New York, 95. A lot of New Yorks, right? Manchester, New Hampshire, 92. Ann Arbor, Michigan, 92. I can never say that word. Poughkeepsie, I think I got it. New York, 91. Boston, Massachusetts, 89. So that Northeast, I mean, look at this, except West Virginia, I guess, and Michigan. But you got Michigan, West Virginia, kind of the outlier. Beyond that, that Northeast area, still a very strong market. Still a very, very strong market. But comment below. Let me know what you think about these scores and if your market's a buyer's or seller's market. I'd like to know. And if you have a market you want me to look at here in a minute, put it in the comments, and I'm happy to look at it. Jackson, Tennessee. These are the worst, by the way. These are where buyers have the most power, or the coldest markets. Jackson, Tennessee, 16. A lot of people think Tennessee is like doomed to fail. Doomed to fail, I guess, or ripe for the failure of the market, however you want to say it. Gulfport, Mississippi, 24. Brownsville, Texas, 26. Macon, Georgia, 26. Daphne, Alabama, 27. Beaumont, Texas, 28. Naples, Florida, 28. Cape Coral, Florida, 30. Panama City, Florida 30, and Punta Gorda, Florida 32. I know there's a lot of, I think that Naples market includes Marco Island. I think there's a lot of investors and just people I know in Ohio that own property on Marco Island. I wonder if there's like a lot of deals there right now. I don't know. Not that I'd ever look at anything in Florida. No way. But some people do. Directionally, does Resi Club agree with Zillow's assessment? Directionally, we believe Zillow has correctly identified many regional housing markets where buyers have gained the most power, particularly around the Gulf, as well as markets where sellers have maintained, relatively speaking, somewhat of a grip, including large portions of the Northeast and Midwest. Based on my personal housing analysis, this is according to Lance Lambert, who owns Resi Club, I consider Southwest Florida the weakest chunk of the U.S. housing market, followed by Texas markets around Austin and San Antonio. What did Zillow analysis look like back in spring of 2022 at the climax of the pandemic housing boom? Below is Zillow's March 2022 reading published in April of 2022. So look at this. Like, all you have to do is look at this map and go, wow, red is hot, orange is not as hot of a market, meaning sellers have control in the red areas. The whole map's red. Look at that. The whole map is red. So sellers had control in 2022 of virtually every market. And then if we scroll up to the market now, look at this. It's changed a lot. I mean, there's no doubt it's changed. So let's dive in and look at some specific markets. Let me make this a little larger. All right, so let me start with Ohio real quick. I got Columbus, Ohio. So you can see back in March of 2018, we were at a 64. That doesn't mean a buyer's market necessarily. That's just a seller's market, right? Because a 55, let me go back to the key real quick. I just want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, a 55, 44 to 55 means neutral market. You have to go to underneath a 44 to get to a buyer's market. So Columbus has always been a seller's market for the past, 9 years, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 years, right? Yeah, 8 years. So Columbus has always been a somewhat of a seller's market, but we're at a 65 now. That's only a little bit above 2018. Like I said at the beginning of this video, when I was flipping homes in Columbus in 2018, it was taking like 30 days to sell a home to get it into contract. That felt normal. That felt fast. Like, oh, okay, you know. And as a buyer, at least you have some time to look at properties. So they're saying it's more, it's headed towards a neutral market. Let's see about Cincinnati. What's up with Cincinnati? They're at a 63 now, but they peaked at an 84. By the way, Columbus peaked at a 115. So a super strong seller's market. Those days are long gone. So Cincinnati is still considered a seller's market. What about Cleveland? Look at Cleveland, a 72. They peaked at a 96. So back in 2018, though, it was a, what's that? That's a, if I'm not mistaken, that's a, yeah, that's a buyer's market in Cleveland back in 2018. Now they're a 72. So while they're still a seller's market, if they drop down to 2018 levels, it will be a buyer's market, according to Zillow's heat index, not according to the housing nerd, but according to Zillow's heat index. But I'm really curious what you think about this data. Let's do, I don't know if I have it on here. Right, I don't have it on here because this is by Metro. Let me look at Detroit. What's up with Detroit? 64, still a seller's market. They topped out at 100. Let's look at some of those areas they were mentioning in the Northeast. Look at New York, New York, 85. I believe that's still a strong, yeah, that's a strong seller's market in New York City. Strong seller's market still. Look at back in 2018, though. It was a neutral market in 2018. And they topped out at 90 on the heat scale. So the heat scale, again, just to reiterate this, if you're just joining us now, that heat scale basically takes in how fast homes are moving. It takes into account home price growth. It takes into account inventory growth and buyer demand. And they crunch all those numbers together to come up with a heat score. Look at this. Look at some areas in, well, let me go back. I'm sorry. Let me go back to the Northeast here. Scranton, Pennsylvania. Look at that, 50. Not quite a buyer's market, but it's definitely a, it's getting there. It's getting down to that number. Oh, that is a buyer's market. Sorry, I'm getting used to this heat index. That is a buyer's market at 50, according to Zillow's heat index. Let's do, but look at Albany, New York, a 95. Definitely a strong seller's market. Boston, Massachusetts, 89. Wow, last year they were a 104. Look at that. Yowzer. Still a very strong seller's market back then. Washington, D.C. A lot of people want to know what's happening in D.C. Still a seller's market. Actually, a strong seller's market in D.C. Huh. Okay. Look at Philly, Philadelphia, PA. While they never really got to a insane level, I mean, they're definitely a strong seller's market at one point, but now they're just a seller's market at 65. So, I mean, it's when you zoom out, folks, like it's easy to see where the pain is. Like if you're, I don't, other people, will maybe ask or talk to you about this and say, hey, the market's changing. There's a lot more buyers markets out there. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to look at. You look at a map like this, you can just take a look and go, huh, southeast, Texas, a lot of pain. Northeast, Midwest, not as much pain. Let's look at some of these buyers markets, though. Look at this one. Look at Indianapolis, Indiana. This one fascinates me. 54. 54, which is a neutral market at a 54. But it never really got to the crazy levels that Columbus did. I think there's more new construction in Indianapolis. I keep seeing that in some national stats. But there's definitely some what they consider, neutral markets or even buyers, I guess weak buyers markets in Indiana, right? Here's Fort Wayne, Indiana. Muncie, Indiana, looks like it's kind of shifting towards buyers. Bloomington, Indiana, right? So even in Ohio, there's a few spots here that they say, like, look at this. I own some property in Mansfield. Holy shnikes. Look at this. Maybe I bought in the wrong market. Look at that. March of 2018, a 3. Can that be right? Mansfield has a score of a 3. That means buyers have all the control. So, and then look where it went, 124. Jeez. Mansfield, by the way, has the Shawshank prison that you can tour from Shawshank Redemption, which is an amazing tour and super creepy. But that's like, I mean, that may be the lowest score I've ever seen on here, a 3. Maybe it's time for the housing lord to sell some of his properties out there. Good grief. But not to, I mean, look at Huntington, West Virginia. Not great either, right? Never has been. 46. But then they say Charleston, West Virginia is a 97. A 97. Still, super strong seller's market. What's going on in Charleston, West Virginia? Maybe there's a power plant or something going up there. I don't know. All right, let's look at some of these other markets. Charlotte, North Carolina, 54. Okay. They didn't peak anywhere near some of these other areas. I mean, they are, at one point, they were a strong seller's market. Now they're more of a neutral market at 54. And generally speaking, what you'll see if you overlay this with a map of inventory, where inventory is skyrocketing, you'll see more and more of a buyer's market. That's just how it works, supply and demand, folks. Supply and demand. Look at Nashville. A 52 in Nashville, Tennessee. That's a neutral market now, they say. It was a strong seller's market back in 2021. Now they're underneath 2018's heat index. Let me check some comments real quick. Parma, Ohio. Huh, I used to know somebody who lived in Parma. Thanks for checking in. I don't know that I have Parma on here. I think they're probably going to, because Parma's like Cleveland, basically, right? So I got Cleveland. I've got Akron. Look at Akron, 72 is a higher heat index score than Columbus, but it's up here somewhere, right? Isn't Parma up here? But Cleveland, 72, right? But they don't give me the little micro area of like Parma. They won't do that. At least I don't think so. Yeah, they're not going to do that. But thank you for checking in from Parma, Ohio. Could you do an overview of Pickerington and Upper Arlington markets? I've had my eye on them for last year, and it seems like Pickerington listings are incredible while UA is totally frozen. Yeah, thanks for checking in. So Dave, there's two things you could do, because I don't have that data in front of me. Like, this map is way too macro for what you're asking for. On my website, if you go to jasonferrier.com, I've got a market status page that shows the heat index of a buyer's or seller's market by school district. And it's broken down by school district by price point. So you can see how much, like if a home is 0 to 300 grand, if buyers or sellers are in control of that market. And I update that every month. So if you go to my website, you can download that and take a look at it. And then my contact information is in the YouTube description. Feel free to email me, and I'm happy to dive into it because I have access to the MLS. So I can get super granular with Central Ohio data. But that's about all from a super granular data, like down to the school district level. So that's what I would suggest, Dave, if you really want that knowledge. I'm happy to help. So just email me. Take me a few days to get back to you, and I'll get you that info. So no obligation, no cost. I'll just provide it. I just like doing it. But yeah, I just listed a home in Upper Arlington, actually. Nice home, big home. All right. Good morning, Stuntfish. How are you? Zane Myers. What's up, Zane? I think houses sitting for longer. Sellers are still in denial of this. Buyers have to be more patient than sellers. By the way, your name is a name. I was trying to think of where I heard your name from. And this may be your real name. I'm not making fun of your name by any means, but it just triggered my brain. It's in a movie, one of my favorite movies, Better Off Dead from the 80s. Great movie. I'm pretty sure that was the guy's name, played by John Cusack. I think houses are sitting for longer. Sellers are still in denial. Yeah, they are. Like in a lot of areas, sellers are. That's wish pricing. Those are folks that want to sell, not need to sell. If you want to sell a property and you don't need to sell a property, that's going to be reflected in the fact that sellers won't move on price. And how to test that? Give them an offer that's low. A lot of people are waiting on a housing market crash. I'm not saying you are, but a lot of people are. They're like, they're either waiting on the numbers to come down or they're waiting on the fraud to come out of the system. I don't know if either's ever going to happen the way they want it to, but if you think prices are going to drop significantly, I would make an offer at a price that you think they're going to, where they should be. So if you think that house should be 30% less, make the offer 30% less. See what happens, right? But yeah, sellers are in denial. What's up? Krasimir. Sellers seem to be surprised here when I low ball offer them. They haven't got the reality yet. Where are you? I like it. Hey, if they don't get that offer, if you're looking for a deal, like if you want a move-in ready house, okay, and you're looking on the MLS, this tactic's probably not going to work. But if you're looking for a deal and you're not emotionally tied to any house and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to make offers until somebody bites. Well, you want that seller to get the offer. Look, cringe, right? Blah. or crumble up the offer and throw it away. I don't like that offer. That's when you know you're like at least in the right direction, in my opinion. But where are you? I want to know. Where's that? Where are you making those low ball offers? And good for you. Oh, you're telling me right now. Charlotte, North Carolina. All right, let's go back and look at Charlotte real quick again. What's up with Charlotte? Raleigh. Charlotte, North Carolina. You're at a 54, considered a neutral market, I guess. A neutral market. But I like the fact that you're making disrespectful offers. That's good. Good for you. Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Let's look at that. El Capitan. Let's go down here. We can zoom in even more. That's like, okay, so yeah, how they're going to do this, El Capitan, is the Miami market includes the Fort Lauderdale, like Hollywood, Florida area. 36. I mean, that's saying it's a buyer's market right now, right? Again, I don't know if, yeah, 28 to 44 is a buyer's market. So, yeah, there's a lot of different sub-markets in there. So depending on what type of home you're looking to buy, if you're looking to buy an affordable home, I don't know this for sure, but I do have a client down there that just, or in Florida, not necessarily Miami or Fort Lauderdale, but in Florida that put their home on the market and it sold, went in contract within days and they had a lot of people looking at the home, but they priced the home right and it was an affordable home. It wasn't like $1 million home overpriced. I think that makes a big difference. But but I would say maybe there's an opportunity. But again, this is a pretty big macro look, right? Like really depends on what micro area you're looking at and what price point. But maybe for a super expensive house in Florida, in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, or a home priced over the median home price, maybe there's an opportunity. Maybe an opportunity. But thanks for asking. What's up, Smoke Screen? How are you? Hey, everybody. Our house has gone up $200,000 in 4 years due to our currency devaluation, but our neighbor just sold their house in a day for top price. I despair. I want it to go down because of property tax. Right. A lot of people do. Property tax isn't fun to pay. It's coming up. I was just thinking about that yesterday. If you're an investor like me, well, not all investors, but a lot of them pay, and even a lot of non-investors pay their property taxes every 6 months, right? Just instead of paying with a mortgage, you pay every 6 months. And so there's like a big bill due every 6 months. In Ohio, it's February and July. That's coming up. So that's not a fun day. I hate that day. You're just like bleeding money that day. And you can't do anything with the expense. You can't write it off. You can't, it doesn't improve the property. It's just, yeah, it's just lost money. Just like flushing it down the toilet. But I understand. Where do you live? I'd like to know what market. Indianapolis has 2 reasons: winter and construction. So you're saying more new construction? Is that what you're trying to say, Laser Angel? I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of areas that have winter. I mean, like the Northeast is winter. That's horrible winters up in the Northeast, and their markets are great. But they don't have any new construction. The Northeast, very, very little new construction. Even in Columbus, I'm shocked at the small amount of new construction in the Columbus, Central Ohio area. It's funny, there's a lot of realtors that sell new builds in Columbus, and they think that this is like a good market for new builds. Maybe it is, like for builders, but you wouldn't know it from the supply end. There's just not a lot of new construction. I'd like to know, though, are you saying winter and new construction, or like road construction? Orlando, what's up, KD? Let's find out. I'm sure Orlando's on here. Ocala. I always mess that up. Okay, Orlando, Florida. 46, which is considered, let me just double check this again. a neutral market, just barely a neutral market, where buyers and sellers, neither one have power. Maybe a neutral market is what everybody would like. Like, if I know people really want a buyer's market, but if it was just a neutral market for a few years, that would probably calm down prices, right? You tell me if it's a neutral market there, meaning, there's negotiation on both ends. Maybe buyers are getting 3-4% off asking price. We could just sit in a neutral market for a long time in many areas. But you didn't really ever get to an insane level. I mean, you were a strong seller's market back in 2022, but it's not like you were at a level like Columbus where you were, over 100. But it was still elevated. But now a 46. Back in 2018, you were a 51. So you're definitely more of a buyer's market than you were in 2018, according to Zillow's data. But thanks for that suggestion, and thanks for watching. Des Moines, Iowa. Isn't do we call that the Tri-Cities? Is that they call that the Tri-Cities? Am I wrong? Whoops. There's Davenport. Where's Des Moines? Oh, there it is. That's not the Tri-Cities. I'm thinking of something else. Why is this doing that? Okay. Des Moines, Iowa. 54. Neutral market, 54. Back in 2018, neutral market, 53. It's kind of like Columbus, where you're back at that 2018 level, around there. And then 2019, 56, 57, 73, 83. So it never really got to, like, again, like Columbus was a well over 100. Other areas were over 100. Not saying it wasn't insane there, because every market obviously has its own beat. But yeah, you were up. You certainly had more of a seller's market back then in 2022. Then it dropped and dropped and dropped. Now it's, yeah, just barely a neutral market. Watch that inventory. If you really want to understand what's happening in your market, watch that inventory of homes in the price range you want to buy in the area you want to buy in. Watch that inventory level. If you see that inventory level start to rise, seasonally start to rise, meaning have a realtor pull the market data going back 5, 6, you can probably go back 10 years if you wanted to. I know in Columbus here, I can go back a long time and look at the historical trend of how much inventory you have in the market for what you want to buy. Watch that inventory level. If you see that thing start to creep and creep and creep up, you know you're shifting more to a buyer's market. You just are. All right, that was good. Something different. Des Moines, I like it. I might check that prison out this summer. Oh, yeah. Oh, Shawshank. Man, that is a crazy tour. The craziest part is that even, unless it's like really warm out, even in like the spring when it's like maybe 50, 60 degrees outside, it's freezing inside that place. It's crazy how cold it is. And it's definitely creepy. Plus, they have a cool museum at the end that kind of shows you the history of, I think it's Westinghouse, if I remember right. That used to basically be the headquarters of Westinghouse in Mansfield, and kind of that. So it's neat. It's a really cool tour. Well worth the trip. And plus, it has the whole tie to the movie that is neat too. So anyway, I really like it. Tulsa, Oklahoma. What do we got? Let's look at Tulsa. I've been to Tulsa. Been to Tulsa. Is this Oklahoma? Nope, Kansas. Where am I? Oklahoma's with the finger. Do we have Tulsa in here? Lawton, Oklahoma. Tulsa, sweet. 54. Huh. A lot of these are like neutral markets. That's considered a neutral market, I guess. Back in 2018, you were at 46, which is still a neutral market, right? 46. Yeah, just barely a neutral market. What time is it? 8:45. So Yeah, they're saying, neither buyer or seller have power. It's more of a happy median, I guess. Let's look at what's up with Oklahoma City. Similar to Tulsa. Look at Oklahoma City, 53. Lawton, Oklahoma, 35. Wow. Look at this. Back in March of 2018, maybe this data maybe they don't have the right data or something, but they're giving it a 0 in Lawton, Oklahoma, for whatever that's worth. But I saw Mansfield, Ohio was a 3. So completely a buyer's market. Like, sellers have 0 power. I would imagine that means that you could just basically, you had to have your house perfect on the market and at a discounted price in order to sell it. And then they had a 9 and a 25. Then they went to a 102. I mean, that is, I think a move from like a 25 like this to a 102 in a market like Lawton, Oklahoma. If this data is correct, that is that's where the locals get destroyed, right? Because on one year the buyers have power and the next year they don't at all. Like, not even close. I mean, if you need any evidence of like the pandemic housing boom and what happened, look at that, 25 to 102. Geez. Anyway, but in Tulsa, you didn't have that kind of swing. I mean, you went from 58 to 73, 73 to 78, 78 to 62, right? And then back down to a neutral market, I guess. That's Tulsa, Oklahoma. Thanks for that. I love these little different markets. Ohio seems to be highly localized pricing based on school district. Yes, it is. I think a lot of areas are. I think if you dissected any of these markets and went inside to the school districts, you can definitely see the differences in buyer power or seller power, no doubt. By the way, got 92 people watching right now. Thanks a lot. Hit the like button. Don't be a freeloader. Don't be a freeloader. All you gotta do is hit the like button. What? What's up, Liz? How are you doing? Thanks for joining us today. Well, let's look at Myrtle Beach, shall we? Where am I here? Oh, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. This is for Liz. I mean, yeah, 42, which is a buyer's market. So Myrtle Beach, South Carolina is in a buyer's market according to Zillow data. I don't know if it is or not, but that's what they're saying. Last year, you were kind of in a buyer's market, and you topped out at 75, just barely over, wasn't it 70? Yeah. So just barely over, well, into that strong seller market category. But back in 2018, 44, that's a buyer's market, right? So 42, a buyer's market. Maybe it's time for me to buy in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I like Myrtle Beach. But thanks for checking in, Liz. Good to see you. House has been on market for 45 days, 479. You think I can offer 430? That too low. I don't, a lot of different factors there. I would say, like, if it depends on how bad you want that home. I always tell buyers, like, and this is a really stupid thing to say, like not stupid. This is just an obvious thing to say. The closer you are to the asking price, the more apt they are to take it. Duh, right? But having said that, if you don't have to have that home, if that home's like, if you're like, well, if I get that one, great, but another one will come up, later on, then make an offer that makes sense for you, Trisha, and see what they say. I mean, you're not going to go to jail for making a low offer. Unless it's the only house like it and it's in the perfect school district, the perfect area, is exactly what you wanted, and you've been looking for houses for years, and you're like, I gotta have that home right there. If we don't buy that home, then we're finished. Well, then maybe make an offer that's low. If you have time, make an offer that makes sense to you, whatever that is. Is that too low? Maybe not. Maybe not. I mean, you can always come back and offer them give them another offer. If they're working with a realtor in most states like Ohio, if you make an offer, that's realtor has to show the seller the offer. And in Ohio, there's an area where the seller can sign saying they've reviewed it. So if you give them an offer, like if you offered 100 grand on this house, the realtor would still have to show the seller that offer. That's just part of my rule as being a realtor. I have to do that. I can't like, and I mean, if the seller, I guess, gives me specific rules and says, I don't want any offers underneath a certain price, that usually doesn't happen. But if they say that, that's a different story. But generally speaking, they have to share all those offers. But I would say make an offer that makes sense for you, whatever that is. And if you really want the house, the closer to the asking price, the more apt you are to get it. But if you're not, if you don't have to have that home, make an offer accordingly. Redfin just put an article out yesterday that said sellers want an average of $39,000 more than buyers want to pay. I'll have to check that one out. By the way, my Redfin update I do every week. I recorded it late last night. I just had a crazy day yesterday, so busy with other things. So I didn't do a live. I did record a Redfin update, and I should have that out probably late tonight or tomorrow. I'll have that published once my editor's done. But that's interesting. $39,000 more than buyers want. Okay. Well, I wonder what that was before. I'll have to check out that article. Thanks for letting me know about that. I mean, the home price and home value, what's a real value of a home? Well, the real value of a home is what somebody's willing to pay for the home. That's how it usually works, right? So if you think your home, like on Zillow, if you look at your Zestimate and you're like, look at my Zestimate, I'm like a king of real estate because it's like double what you paid for it. Well, if nobody's willing to pay that price, that's really not the value, right? So just because somebody wants $39,000 more, if buyers are not willing to pay that, that's not the price of that's really not the value of the home. Dan in the dirt, what's up in your truck? Pretty cool. Good morning to you, sir. 20% price drop in Northwest Ohio would be great. Yeah, I'm sure it would be. Are you like in Toledo? Is that where you are, Smokescreen, I think? I mean, a 20% price drop in many markets would be great, right? Some people are hoping for a 50% price drop. Oh, whoa. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me go down. Trisha, you're in Niles, Illinois. So Chicago is tough. Like, that is a tough market. Here's what I've noticed in Chicago. Look at this. You're at a 70, which is a seller's market, a strong seller's market, basically, in Chicago. But in 2018, you were at a 51. And then, which is that a neutral market? 51? Yeah, a neutral market. Then you stayed in a neutral market, but then you went up to 75, but you peaked at 79. So you didn't, and that's a strong seller's market, but it wasn't like over 100. But then you dropped just slightly, went up in 2024, and now you dropped, but you're still a strong seller's market in Chicago. And when I looked at the inventory recently, so if you go back 2 videos, no, I'm sorry. A couple days ago, I did a video around inventory levels. I think it was earlier in the week. I looked at Chicago, and you could check that out. I don't think I chaptered it yet, though. I didn't timestamp that one, unfortunately. Maybe I'll get to that. Your inventory levels were like really low still, comparatively to what you've seen over the past 9 years. So it seems like Chicago's a tough market. My point of that is, if you're in a market that's super tough and houses that you said, you asked, am I making an offer that's too low? If homes are selling fast, then and sellers are getting what they're asking for homes, the chances of you getting an offer accepted that's low, really low, is probably low, right? Conversely, if a market is exploding in inventory, the chances of you getting a better deal are higher. They just are, because sellers have more competition. So I'm not saying you shouldn't make a low offer. I'm just saying if your market's hot in that little micro area you live in Niles, then chances are you're going to get you're not going to have a good of a chance to get a low offer accepted. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. But I feel for you in Chicago. It's a tough market. It is. But thanks for letting me know. Let me keep going here. Denver. I looked at Denver earlier. I think before I started this thing. Denver, Colorado. 72 back in 2018, but now a 61. Denver's exploding with inventory though. They're up a lot. I did that on my Redfin update that'll get published late tonight or tomorrow. I dive into the Denver like more detailed stats as far as pricing and new listings and all that jazz. And it's definitely, the prices don't seem like they've been reflected yet, the sale prices as much, but the inventory levels are high in Denver. You were a 102 though for 2 years in a row. That's a big difference from where you started at 72, right? So that was still a seller's market though in Denver. And it's still technically a seller's market, right? A 61 is still a seller's market, but you were a strong seller's market back in 2018, which is crazy. Then a super strong seller's market, like in the stratosphere back in 2021. I'm curious if you're seeing prices start to drop there yet at all. Yeah, thanks for Denver. I'm about to sell. What's up, brother Ted? I'm about to sell on the Jersey Shore and buy in Austin, Texas via a 1031. Sweet. Hopefully to capture the Austin dip. Good for you. Must be a second home, right? Like a rental or something? Because you're doing a 1031? Great. I love the fact that I'm sure prices in Jersey, well, in a lot of areas in Jersey, prices are ridiculous still. Like that market, a lot of that Northeast market hasn't slowed down at all. Let me look at Jersey City. Forgive me my struggles on math. Trenton, Violent, Atlantic City. Isn't that where it is? Isn't Jersey City like here near Atlantic City? If I'm right, am I right? Yeah, it's like right here. I think. Or is that near? Wait a minute. You didn't say Atlantic City, did you? You said Jersey Shore. Oh, my fault. Not Jersey City. Jersey Shore. So that's Atlantic City, right? Maybe not. I don't know much about the Jersey Shore. But look at this. Let me just hang on one second. Yeah. Yeah, I'm right, I think. Right there. So you were a 29. Buyers had a lot of power back then in 2018, is saying. I mean, that's a buyer's market, right? 29 is a buyer's market. And then you went 37, 39, 71, 81. So it became a strong seller's market, super strong seller's market. It says it's now a neutral market, I believe. Yeah, it says it's a neutral market, but I imagine the market there is, and this is probably not as of a micro look as we need. But the fact that you're buying in the dip in Austin, that's great. I'm sure that's going to work out for you. Hopefully, good for you looking for a dip. Because where's Austin? Let's go to Austin. Austin says it's a 53. It doesn't even say it's a buyer's market yet. But it was at a 120, which is a massive difference. Maybe the difference from a 120 down to a 53, maybe that huge swing in 4 years has shocked the sellers. I'm sure it has. That's why my thumbnail is shock, right? And title, because I'm sure a lot of sellers are like, whoa, that's a big change. Maybe you can score a deal. And I love the fact you're using a 1031. Well done. Well done on the 1031. Not many. There's too many people that give the government their tax money because they don't use a 1031, because they don't want to take the time to use a 1031. They think, you know what? That seems really complicated and too difficult. I'm not going to do it. But a 1031, folks, if you have an investment property, a 1031 can really help you defer that tax for years and years and years. Eventually, if you do it right, I'm not a tax professional. You have to consult an accountant, but as a real estate investor, I deal with 1031s a lot, and they can be a great tool. So well done, well done, well done. I'm looking in Berkeley or Metamora. I don't know where that is. Talking about Berkeley, California? I don't know. Charlotte, North Carolina. I did Charlotte earlier. I did Charlotte, North Carolina earlier. Somebody asked for Charlotte. Oh, no, Smokescreen, you're in Toledo. All right, let me see. Oh, that's right. You're looking for a house hack. Okay, here's Toledo. We got Toledo on the list here. 33. 2018 had a 33. Now you've got a 61. So it says it's still a seller's market. But, and I guess you topped out at a 95. So a super strong seller's market at one point. But now it is still a seller's market. The 61, right? Yeah, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean you can't get a deal. You're just going to have to look hard. And anybody in a seller's market, you may have to look off market. You may have to, I mean, I always encourage people to look off market, but you got to look, you know, drive for dollars. That's a great way to find a deal. Get in your car, drive the neighborhoods, write down addresses of homes that look distressed or look like they need help, or cross them over with a tax list, or cross them over with a code violation list, and then see where those properties align, and then write them a letter that says, hey, I'd like to buy your house. If you're interested, give me a call. If not, no big deal. And then you'll be shocked how many people will reach out to you. Some will tell you to leave them alone, which is fine. Take them off your list. Some will tell you, hey, let's talk. But a great way to find an opportunity. Okay, I can take, let me see. I got time for one more. One or two more here. What's up? Peace, love, and happiness. Right. Hit the like button. No one likes a freeloader. Sacramento, California. Okay. Let's look at Sacktown. Sacktown, Sacktown. It's that right here, right? 62 back in 2018. 65 now. So still a seller's market. Yep, it is. According to Zillow data anyway. And this is a macro look at the metro, right? Not individual neighborhoods. That definitely have to do that if you really want to nail down what's happening. And you can kind of do your own heat score anyway. If you looked at, several factors, days on market, active listings, right? And the number of home sales. If you looked at those factors and you looked at them consistently over a period of time, you would see a trend emerge that tells you, hey, is this market headed to buyers or sellers? If you see homes sitting on the market longer and longer and longer, and you see inventory rising, then you know that it's moving to a buyer's market. If you see days on market not dropping and days on market actually staying steady or going down, heaven forbid, and you see inventory not increasing, right? If inventory is kind of staying the same or if inventory is going down, then you know, probably more of a seller's market. So you can kind of do that in your individual micro area anyway. But yeah, it looks like at one point you had a definitely a strong seller's market. Now it's just a seller's market. So that's at Sacramento. Sacramento. But thanks for that. I appreciate it. How do I send? Oh, I like this one. Wait, before I get to this, let me just hit this one quick. Appreciate it. Thanks. I'll look into driving for dollars this summer. Good. Good. Summer's a great time. Well, anytime's a great time to do it, honestly. But if you do it in the summer, look for weeds, right? Look for houses where you're like, hey, all these grasses are mowed. That one's not. That has big, tall weeds on it, right? Or look for cars where it has the weeds growing around the cars, right? You've seen that, right? Where people use a mower, a push mower, or a ride mower, and they don't use a weed eater, and there's grass growing around the wheels. And you know that car's been sitting there a long time. To me, multiple cars in the driveway, not moving, Christmas decorations in the summer, that's a good sign. Overall distress of the house, like if the house just looks like it needs a lot of work, like a new roof, if it looks like it needs landscape, like the landscaping is overgrown on the property. And some cities, depending on where you live, will give you a list of people with code violations. They'll actually give you a list of owners that have had multiple code violations. Then as you're driving, you mark down houses that you think are distressed and then marry those two lists together. And when you marry them together, you'll have properties that are similar on both lists. Those are the ones you can mail to. That's kind of a way to kind of get what I would call two pain points. Then in the winter, look for houses where there's no footprints in the snow or it hasn't been shoveled in a long time. Like if you drive past a house and it's snowed like a week ago and there are no footprints in the snow, that would tell you the house may be vacant. That's a good one to mail to. But you got to find the owner's mailing address. Got to find the owner's mailing address. Great question. I'm glad you're doing that, Smokescreen. Edwin, great question here. How do I send offers without a realtor? Well, you have to if you're not going to work with a realtor, which is fine, like a buyer agent realtor, and maybe that's what you're talking about. Oh, hang on. Oh, you give me a super chat. Wow. Dude, Edwin, that was really nice of you. I really appreciate it. Thank you. It means a lot. Definitely means a lot. How do I send disrespectful offers without a realtor? I have a master's in finance. Awesome. Work at a bank, looking in Sugar Grove, Illinois. Just fired realtor. Dude was a bozo. Oh, that's hilarious. Well, if you're not under an agreement with the buyer agent, then you can reach directly out to the listing agent that has listed the property, if that's what you're talking about, to obviously tour the home. The trick is, under the new National Association of Realtor rules, thanks to that lawsuit that was supposed to help buyers and lower home prices, but now, because of that agreement and that lawsuit, you have to sign a buyer agent agreement. I think it's a national rule. You have to sign that buyer agent agreement in order to see a home. So you can't go see a home without actually a listed home and do a showing, unless it's an open house. You can go to open houses without doing this. But if it's not an open house, you have to sign a buyer agent agreement in order to see it. Now, you can sign that sometimes with a listing agent. So the person that actually has the house listed, you can sign that agreement with them saying, I want to come see the house you have listed. But that agreement, as in all agreements, mostly in real estate, are negotiable. Meaning that agreement could say something like, I want to see this, or the agreement could say that it's you're beholden to that agent for 3 months, 6 months. But you can negotiate it and tell them, I only want the agreement for 1 day. I only want the agreement for 2 hours. That's what you could negotiate and tell them. Say, I'll sign a buyer agent agreement to come see your listing, but I'm only going to sign it for 2 hours or a day, so that, and make sure there's no any other language in there. I would have it reviewed by an attorney if you need to, but basically sign the agreement so it's only good to see that house, and that's it. And then once you've seen the house and you're not underneath that agreement anymore to have to pay that realtor 3% or 2% or whatever they want, then you can make the offer directly to the realtor. That's how you can do it. If it's an open house you're going to go to, usually you don't need a buyer agreement to go see the open house. And so you can tour the house, just get the realtor's name, and then you can find contracts on the internet, or you can have your attorney draft a purchase agreement for you. You can do that. You can also contact that listing agent and actually tell them, say, I want to make an offer on this. And when they say, well, who are you working with? Say, nobody. I'm going to make this directly with you. Sometimes those agents will send you the purchase contract that you can fill out yourself, like the standard state purchase contract. So there's a way to navigate around it. You just have to be tactful and be careful. So don't sign any buyer agreement that you haven't understood 100%. And then if you want to make the offer directly to that realtor, sometimes just calling them and telling them that you want to do that, then they'll send you the boilerplate purchase contract that you can then fill out and send back to them, or get with an attorney who specializes in real estate, have them draft a purchase agreement for you that you can use in the future on other properties. That's another way to do it. Or you can just go online and literally Google purchase agreement for real estate, and then marry that up with some attorney advice to get one that, you know, maybe for a lower cost. I hope that makes sense. And as far as the disrespectful part, you just make the offer that makes sense for you. That's all you got to do. Meaning, once you get the process figured out and you're like, okay, I got the contract now, the purchase contract, I'm going to fill it out. You just fill out the offer that you want to make. That's all you have to do. I hope that helped. But if it didn't, email me directly, and I'm glad to help you. Just, you know, I don't know Illinois law, so you have to get with people there, but I can, you know, give you some general advice, I guess. But thank you for the super chat, and thank you for the question, and good job in your master's degree. Yeah, a realtor tried to leech into my offer, had a call a managing broker pre-approved for $600K. Well, good job being pre-approved. Thank you. You're welcome. You don't need a realtor to buy a property. That's 100% true. You do not need a realtor to buy a property. Although I will say that new lawsuit did not make it any easier to not use a realtor. That part where you have to sign a buyer agreement, it's amazing that, like, there hasn't been more uproar from the public about this. I mean, this whole lawsuit was supposed to help buyers and I guess help people, but it hasn't helped. It's made things much more difficult on buyers, much more difficult. I mean, there are people that I know that have contacted me on my channel that have signed 2 buyer agreements, meaning they sign a buyer agreement, they're under contract, they don't know that they're under contract with a buyer agent, then they sign another buyer agent agreement, and then they have to pay 2 commissions. That's happened. It's just not a, in a way, it's kind of ironic, right? That people were all upset about real estate rules and commissions, thinking that realtors were getting too much money. So they all got together and came up with this lawsuit and thought they were going to, you know, tackle the system. And then it completely backfired. Nuts. Yeah, I use a notary. Oh, to buy a property. Yeah, you can. You can use a title agency. A lot of title agencies will help you through the process too. A lot of them have attorneys on staff. Going back to Edwin's question, I would just take the time to look at every angle possible to buy a property how you want to buy it. Don't let the system manipulate you into doing what others just do because they don't know any better. So just the fact that you're asking about this is great. That lawsuit is total BS. It has some good aspects to it. It made sellers more aware of commissions. I will say that sellers now are much more aware of commissions, and the way that we present seller commissions in the document is much different than what it was before. And so that has helped. I will say that. Helped, I mean, sellers understand that they don't need to just they're not beholden to a commission rate, that there's a separation there between the buyer and the buyer agent and selling agent. All right. Like usual, this goes on a long time, but I got to get going and do some real work. Listen, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the interaction. Be on the lookout for my Redfin update. And I'm the housing nerd, and I'm out.